credit card debt. And one of the reasons for this is that the higher education system is controlled by something our next speaker refers to as the iron triangle of regional accreditation organizations, schools, and federal bureaucrats. But the reason I'm so excited is Mike Lee is a special person. Mike came here in the 2010 election. Within months of Mike coming to Washington, we were working with him on something the Heritage Foundation had put forth called our Saving the American Dream Plan. Mike would come by Mondays at 6:30. He'd sit down with our policy experts, really steep himself in the policy of this. I haven't met anybody in Washington, D.C. more interested in ideas than Mike Lee, and that's why it's been such a privilege for us to be able to work with him for the last 3 years. One of the themes that you've heard me referring to throughout this event from the morning straight through all the afternoons, we are not going to be able to advance conservative policy in this town until we're willing to take on the status quo bias of Washington, D.C., until we're able to trust bold ideas to inspire Americans to change Washington from the outside in. And I think part of the reason that Mike Lee has been such a forceful advocate for big, bold ideas is that he also recognizes that. He has not been afraid to take on the status quo bias of Washington, D.C., and in doing that has come forth with what I think are some of the most innovative proposals that we've seen in Washington in quite some time. Mike's here to talk about his Higher Education Reform Opportunity Act. It's something that I think would radically transform the way higher education works for the better, empower people with choice and options that make more sense for themselves. So I'm pleased to share the stage with Senator Mike Lee, and he'll take questions afterwards. I get also, sir.
It's good to be with you today. As I was on my way in, Mike Needham said to me, are you all set to talk about railroad policy? I had one of those brief moments of panic where I thought, maybe I got the wrong message, and then I realized it was just Mike being Mike. It reminded me of a story told by a former member of my staff, David Barlow, who was my chief counsel a couple of years ago. He has a son named William, who was sometimes restless during church. William's about 5 years old, and he was sitting there in church one day, and David said, "William, you need to be good during church, and if you have a hard time holding still, maybe you should stop for a minute and think about Jesus." And William would hear nothing of that, and he said, "No, Dad, just to be perfectly clear, I'm not thinking about Jesus. I'm thinking about trains." And a few minutes later, David said, "Okay, well, look, just hold still for a few more minutes, and then this part of church will be over, and you can go to Sunday school, and you can see your friends, and that'll be fun." And he said, "Just to be clear, Dad, I will not be thinking about Jesus during Sunday school either. I will still be thinking about trains." So one day, as I was on my way to deliver a speech on the Senate floor, actually about railroad policy, my wife sent me a text message saying, "I'm thinking about trains." So before I begin my remarks today, I want to thank Heritage Action and all of the scholars at Heritage that have made today possible. And I think the conservative movement really is at its best when it's all about ideas. And I think 2014 is something that's likely to prove to be the beginning of an important and new era for our country, an era in which Americans are going to need conservatives to be at our best. And for decades, that's really what the Heritage Foundation has been all about making sure that conservatives are at our best. And as we begin the process of developing a new and long overdue conservative reform agenda, events like this are going to prove to be an invaluable, indispensable part of the development of that very agenda that we so badly need. In 1861, Abraham Lincoln told the United States Congress that to him, the leading object of government was to, quote, "elevate the condition of men, to lift artificial weights from all shoulders, to clear the paths of laudable pursuit for all, to afford all an unfettered start and a fair chance in the race of life." Today, one of the great artificial weights on the shoulders of working families, hardworking Americans from one coast to the other, And one of the great obstacles blocking their paths of laudable pursuit is the rising cost of higher education, along with the narrowed access to that kind of education and the uncertain value that that kind of education sometimes has attached to it. Those problems are symptoms of the deep paradox that is at the heart of higher education policy in America today. And the challenge to policymakers is to overcome that paradox by reconciling two seemingly conflicting, seemingly contradictory, seemingly irreconcilable facts. On the one hand is the United States continues to transition from an industrial economy to an information-based, information age economy. Higher education is more important to social opportunity and to economic mobility than it ever has been at any time in our history. And on the other hand, the standard credential of higher education in America, that is, the bachelor's degree, is being progressively devalued by the diminishing quality and exploding costs of undergraduate education in America. How is it possible that higher education is becoming more valuable and a bachelor's degree is becoming less valuable at the same time? Well, I answer that question by pointing out that these are not the same thing. A higher education and a bachelor's degree are two different, distinct concepts. And I believe that to succeed in the 21st century global information age economy, the vast majority of Americans will need at least some post-secondary knowledge and skills. But a 4-year sojourn at a traditional brick-and-mortar Ivy residential institution is not necessarily any longer the only way to get those things. Part of the problem is simple vocabulary. Until very recently, the college campus was really the only game in town when it came to higher education. To make higher education cost-effective, you needed a centralized location where students from far away could be close to teachers, where scholars from different fields could be close together so that they could have an opportunity to work one with another, and where all of the above could be in the immediate proximity of a common library that would be shared by the various constituent parts of the university. Today, technology has made it possible for students to take classes from professors in another state, for academics to conduct research with colleagues across oceans, and for anyone with an iPad to carry a library around in their backpack. For the first time in history, students don't have to go to college to go to college. Today, there are vocational programs and specialized training programs, especially in growing technological industries. There are apprenticeships in the skilled trades. There are hybrid on-campus and on-the-job models. There are public, private, and for-profit colleges of varying tiers and emphases. There is the burgeoning promise of distance learning options like massive open online courses, or MOOCs as they're sometimes described. Unfortunately, this innovative alternative market is being cordoned off from the vast majority of students by an increasingly outdated federal policy governing higher education accreditation. Here's how it works. Federal student assistance, and I'm speaking here primarily of Stafford loans and Pell Grants, are offered through Title IV of the Federal Higher Education Act. Under the law, students are eligible for Title IV loans or Title IV loans and grants only if they attend formally accredited schools. There is a good quality control argument for this kind of arrangement, except that's not where the restrictions end. The restrictions, unfortunately, and I believe unnecessarily, go much further than that. Under the law, only degree-issuing academic institutions are allowed to be accredited, and only the U.S. Department of Education can authorize accreditors under this system. Furthermore, as you might remember, Congress effectively killed the private student loan industry in 2009. Taken together, these restrictive policies artificially narrow America's path into the middle class and into economic opportunity. In effect, the federal government today operates a kind of higher education cartel. Federally approved creditors operate as a gatekeeper to keep unwanted providers out of the market. This arrangement does not protect students from bad actors so much as it protects incumbent colleges from innovative competitors. Inevitably, as government has closed, protected, and subsidized this market, it has started to break down. The price of college has exploded, so it's now impossible for all but the wealthiest students to pay their own way through an undergraduate higher education experience. Meanwhile, the ubiquity of the BA degree has made it difficult to achieve middle-class security without that increasingly expensive and increasingly nebulous credential. However unintentionally, the current policies are creating three distinct classes of students. First, you have the affluent kids who attend the best public and private high schools prior to going to college, who are then all but certain to graduate from college and simply have to decide which college they're going to attend, which college is ultimately going to announce them as graduates. Next, you have high school graduates who certainly could go to college, but are reluctant to take on that much debt, the amount of debt that it will require them to incur as a condition for attending college. And some of them might prefer to explore a more tailored, more affordable option for their education or their training. And then there are the people that current policy all but locks out of the current higher education financing system. High school dropouts, students betrayed by the system who are socially promoted all the way to graduation in high school without being prepared for college-level work, and others like single parents whose life circumstances might make it almost impossible for them to take enough courses at a time to qualify for federal assistance. In effect, Washington's offer to most Americans after high school is go tens of thousands of dollars into non-dischargeable debt to pursue an overpriced degree that there's no guarantee you'll ever even receive, or, alternatively, spend the rest of your life locked out of America's middle class. This is not a good choice. Most progressives think increasingly that increasing the level of taxpayer assistance will make up for any policy dysfunction. In this area, as in so many others, they just say, let's throw more money at the problem, and the problem will eventually go away. But we've tried that. And just like in the housing market, like in so many other areas where the government's just thrown more money at a problem, what we've done is to inflate the bubble. Last summer, outstanding student debt passed $1 trillion, now greater than total outstanding credit card debt throughout the country. It seems to me that the answer isn't more funding for existing Title IV programs. Instead, I think the answer is to make more kinds of students and more kinds of educational experiences eligible for these kinds of programs, eligible for Title IV funding. That's what my bill, the Higher Education Reform and Opportunity Act, would do. It would empower states to create alternative, parallel accreditation systems to enable students in their respective states to get Title IV assistance in order to attend alternative post-secondary education providers. Participation would be totally voluntary from state to state and would in no way interfere with the current system. State-based accreditation would, in this respect, augment, it would supplement, but not replace the current existing accreditation regime. College presidents can rest assured that if they like their regional accreditor, they can keep their regional accreditor. And I mean it. I'm absolutely sincere in that one. The key difference here would be that state-based accreditation would not be limited to traditional degree issuing, brick-and-mortar academic institutions. Title IV aid would be available to students seeking specialized programs, apprenticeships, professional certifications, competency tests, and even individualized courses. Nor would states be limited to authorizing incumbent accrediting agencies. Businesses, labor unions, trade associations, nonprofit groups, and any other applicant that met the state's requirements could be empowered to accredit one of these programs. Under state accreditation, America's higher education market would become as diverse and nimble as the job-creating industries that are looking to hire new workers. Authorized businesses could accredit courses and programs to teach precisely the kinds of skills that they need. Imagine computer courses accredited by Apple or Google. Dow could accredit a chemistry program. Boeing could craft its own aerospace engineering major. Or Hilton could accredit a hospitality training program specifically designed to meet current market needs. Accrediting individual courses would give the student still weighing her options the chance to take a course or two without going thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars into debt. An entry-level employee who needed only to take a few classes to qualify for a promotion could find a program specifically tailored to match his individualized needs. Accrediting competency exams would allow students to acquire skills on their own timelines, liberally from, and in this respect, they would be freed from the arbitrary semester calendar, which is kind of a relic of a bygone era. It's something that existing brick-and-mortar institutions would, of course, be free to hold on to, but not everyone would have to remain wedded to it. High school graduates unprepared for college or for a career and left in this state of unpreparedness by their failing high schools could get assistance to start catching up in remedial classes or getting professional skills. Single moms and parents pulling double shifts could finally become eligible for Title IV funds to build their transcripts at a personalized rate and at a sustainable pace. Labor unions and companies employing skilled workers could accredit innovative apprenticeship and training programs, potentially developing entirely new delivery models. That's another exciting feature of this plan. It opens doors for more students and for more teachers, for more types of students and more types of teachers. In innovating states, talented faculty who might be uninterested in esoteric publish or perish types of research that are often required for tenure at a more traditional institution could instead focus their energy on classroom excellence, on being better teachers, rather than on the constant push for more research and more publication. Groups of professors could strike out on their own, forming new business models like medical practices. They could offer high-quality higher education for a fraction of the cost of 4 years at a traditional university. States could finally start to level the playing field for new innovators like MOOCs, these massive open online courses, and see where empowered students and teachers can take that kind of technology. These reforms would begin to turn higher education into the cutting-edge growth industry our information economy needs to be, desperately needs to become. Institutions of civil society could play a crucial role in this kind of system as well. Nonprofit groups like the U.S. Historical Society or the Sierra Club or the Mayo Clinic could accredit programs in their respective fields or competency measuring exams for various courses. Think of the proliferation of opportunities that could come from this. Faith communities and civic organizations could begin to offer local students accredited college courses. They could do so for next to nothing, and they could do so as part of their missions for those that they represent and those that they are dedicated to serving. Qualified individuals could make teaching higher education their form of tithing or their form of community volunteering. After all, properly considered, the retired mechanic who lives down the street and the stay-at-home mom with the master's degree and the Civil War reenacting enthusiast who has an encyclopedic knowledge of military history, all are potential teachers that current policy tends to keep on the sidelines. Alternative accreditation could start to get those kinds of people into the game and more Americans into the middle class, which is exactly what we want. After all, how long does one think that we really have to wait for Heritage University? I'd like to see that someday. Yeah, with Professor Needham teaching. Seriously, we already know that people other than tenured academics can teach college-level material. Adjunct professors, teaching assistants, and high school advanced placement teachers do it every single day. Some of the best courses I took in college and in law school were from adjunct professors. And we already know credentials, other than the traditional degrees offered by brick-and-mortar higher learning institutions, can be made to work perfectly well in fields that use them. Accountants take the CPA exam. Stockbrokers take the Series 7. And skilled tradesmen have their various journeyman exams, just to name a few. And in the most important growth industry in our economy, high technology, non-academic professional certifications have already been in the marketplace, where they've been flourishing and widely accepted for many, many years. The market is moving in this direction already. It's time for federal policy to catch up to the marketplace. There are too many valuable opportunities and invaluable people that current law, current policy tends to exclude. It's time to decouple Title IV eligibility and enrollment at degree-issuing institutions. My bill would begin that process, spurring innovation and experimentation, creating jobs and opportunities for students, teachers, and everyone in between, opening up the higher education market to new ideas, and driving down costs while lowering barriers to the middle class. Some reformers might want to go even further to open up the market with a national system based in Washington, or blow up the existing accreditation system altogether. But I submit that housing alternative accreditation in the states accomplishes three conservative goals all at the same time. First, it will protect the new market from the cronyism that almost inevitably targets centralized power. It's a lot harder for special interests to get to 50 competing states than to corrupt a single monolithic bureaucracy headquartered in one single city. Second, it will allow competitive federalism to work its magic, just as the Founding Fathers always intended. Neighboring states will be able to check one another's imprudence and inaction as those things might arise. And voters will finally begin to have a say in this process, too, as higher education reform and innovation becomes an important issue in gubernatorial and state legislative campaigns. And finally, it will preserve and reward what does work at today's colleges and universities. It's wrong to say that America's higher education system is failing. It isn't. And in fact, that system succeeds every day beyond any reasonable expectation of the people who created it many generations ago. Our best colleges remain the best colleges anywhere in the world. That's why students from around the world come here to the United States to study. But federal higher education policy is failing the two-thirds of Americans who never get a BA, and the large majority of Americans who never set foot on a college campus. Those Americans need access to skills that current colleges are not teaching, at prices that four-year residential institutions can't afford to offer, on timelines that the academic calendar can't accommodate. And the lower a student's income and the more pressing their life circumstances, the greater their need. In today's more customizable world, students should be able to build their transcripts a la carte, on campus and online, in classrooms and in offices, with traditional semester courses and alternative scenarios like competency-based testing. And their assistants should follow them at every step along the way. We don't need to dump our higher education system. We just need to open it up to more students and to more teachers that can benefit from it. A little competition would be good for everyone, but the goal of reform should be to build up, not to tear down. So instead of eliminating our current accreditation regime, my bill would simply allow 50 new ones to compete with it and to compete with each other, with enough quality control to protect students and taxpayers and enough flexibility to incentivize experimentation and innovation. In higher education, as in so many other areas, the greatest threats to equal opportunity, that is, those artificial weights, those obstacles that Abraham Lincoln so eloquently referenced, are the unintended consequence of dysfunctional government policies. The current system has left a lot of people. It's left a lot of people behind. It's also helped a lot of people. Reform needs to circle back and make equal opportunity a reality for everyone, so that it's not just there for the lucky ones. The point of higher education policy should be to enable good teachers to teach, willing students to learn, the economy to grow, and civil society to flourish. And most of all, it should look out for those students that the current system is leaving behind. The American people are ready to meet that challenge. And accreditation reform, I believe, will start to give them that very chance, the chance they need to succeed. Thank you very much.
Senator, we'll take questions, but maybe just to start off, you've gotten effusive praise from everybody in the think tank world, the conservative intelligentsia. What feedback are you getting from kind of other places, from higher education world, from state governments?
For those who are familiar with this proposal, the praise has been pretty consistent. The only significant concerns that I've heard have been from a couple of people in the more traditional brick and mortar institutions that have been initially misinformed about what it would do. I've had some college administrators who, understandably, when they were under the mistaken impression that this was going to tear down the existing system, they wanted to warn me that that might not be such a good idea. But as soon as I explained what this actually does, that concern seemed to dissipate. So yeah, the response has been overwhelmingly positive thus far.
Hi, how you would, well, first of all, the terms when I was growing up were mentor and internship and things along those lines. So it's not new concepts, it's just new ways of describing it. Are you addressing the F1 visas that are active on campus? I met a young girl from China the other day, and she was getting her Social Security card, which she needed to get to have her internship at CAP and get paid. These are jobs that should go to American students. When she leaves the country, she takes her Social Security number with her. While she's here, she's eligible to get credit cards, driver's license. So in your bill, are you addressing that as one of the attacks on the kids that are growing up here, wanting the job, and they have a life that they will continue on here?
No, this bill doesn't deal with any of the immigration issues. It doesn't reform the F1 visa system. I understand that there is always need for reform in that area, but that is not the focus of this bill.
Jerry.
Do you have much support within the Senate, your colleagues in the Senate or others for this, for the elements within your bill?
You know, we've just introduced it within the last few weeks. We've got a handful of co-sponsors, but the idea is still new enough. It's still somewhat novel. To where people are still getting their arms around it. We're not under any kind of mistaken impression that this is going to pass within a matter of days or weeks. This is going to take some time. But the good news is that those who have reviewed it have thus far been very encouraging, and I'm optimistic about where it's going. Harry Reid has yet to sign on as a co-sponsor, but I will let you know as soon as he does.
So there is a reauthorization coming up this summer. How do you see that impacting the kind of dialogue?
Well, that is one of the many reasons why in the Senate we need to restore the regular order amendment process. Because anytime we're dealing with some kind of reauthorization of an existing program, a reauthorization that needs to occur, we need to consider options along with it. Things like this have a much higher likelihood of getting to a vote and therefore of being debated and considered and having the relative, the various policy merits discussed and debated whenever they come up in connection with a vote. And a vote's much more likely to occur if we have an open amendment process. The way things have been functioning lately, that would seem like more or less an impossibility. I mean, from July of last year through the end of January of this year, we had a total of 4 roll call votes in the Senate. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, on measures introduced by Republicans. And that's because the majority leader has been relying on this procedure whereby he fills the amendment tree, and blocks basically all amendments other than those that he personally blesses. We're working with him to try to break that logjam. We think that's wrong, and we also think that this ultimately is neither a Republican nor a Democratic issue. It's neither conservative nor liberal. It's simply an American issue. It's a constitutional issue. And it's an issue of public policy where the American people vote for us, they send us there, they do expect us to take votes, and not just those that the majority leader in his infinite wisdom deigns to grant us.
Any conversations with Mitch Daniels, who's now at Purdue, and he's done, obviously he would need some more flexibility with a bill such as yours, but something called the Gallup-Purdue Index that's now going to try to come up with a new gauge of college students, saying that degrees aren't necessarily they don't equate to being prepared in the workforce. I was just wondering if you've had any conversations with him, and have you followed anything he's been doing at Purdue?
Yeah, I have heard of that, and I think what we're doing arises out of a similar pattern of thinking. I have not yet met with Mitch Daniels. I hope to do so sometime in the near future. I think there's a lot I could learn from that.
Maybe time for one more?
I imagine that this is a great first step for higher ed reform, but I imagine that it is just a first step in your eyes. What do you think other opportunities are for reform of the higher ed world? Maybe more metrics for increased transparency so people know what their dollars are going to buy them long term as far as career prospects. What do you see as other opportunities?
Yeah, so metrics and sort of the buyer notifications that often come with a product. This is how much this refrigerator will cost you to operate for an entire year. You know that when you buy a refrigerator. You know the miles per gallon rating that a car receives before you buy the car. A lot of people have suggested that we require similar information to be disclosed when it comes to higher education, and that especially where federal funds are involved, that there ought to be some kind of metrics produced and made available to the consumer, the student, about what the graduation rates are, about what the employment rates are post-graduation, about what the salary ranges are within those majors. And I think those are some of the other reforms that are likely to be considered.
Sir, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We have our final panel will be Raul Labrador talking about religious liberty. He's on his way up right now, but if anyone needs to take a brief break, we'll take a couple minutes.